Amol Sakmazon used to say the Mashgiach used to be in the yeshiva, he used to look on the other side of the Zal, and he was able to recognize if they're talking in learning or they're talking another subject. Dr. the Mashgiach used to come over and ask me, is lernen or wegen lernen? So, Anekude about the Indian of learning Ilchas Beis Abchire. Tavshin and Aleph was the same quiz like this year. Shabbos was a Shavuos B'Tammuz was a Nitche, and the Rebbe went on to explain the special time that we're in, and based on that, in what way has to be the Indian of limud of Ilchos Beis Abchire. So the Rebbe said like this: that when in a fast we have the Indian of the tzoim, the Indian the fact that we're fasting. Then we have the toiv that is hidden in the Indian of the toine, in the Indian of the tanes, the fact that the fast is eventually going to be nefach l'sosim v'lesimcha. So we have both aspects. But when the tanes falls on Shabbos, so the tanes is not only it's being pushed off the fact that we don't fast. It's being pushed off, but at the same time, it's being brought out in the open, in more bad goshe, more emphasized the idea that the Tones is a day that is eventually going to be nefach to sosim v'simcha, like the pasuk says, these days will be transformed into yomim tovim. So just like when it's on Shabbos, so it's more mudgish, the Indian of the toiv part, the good part of the Tones is mudgish when it's on Shabbos. The same thing when we look at the old scope and the alle deures throughout all the generations, says the Rebbe that as we're getting closer to the Geula Amitis Vashleime, so when we're talking about our feeling, the feeling of the feeling of the Churban and the Golus of these days is getting less and less, and it becomes more the feeling of the fact that it's a achone for the Geula, the fact that it's preparing, we're getting ready for the Geula. The toiv, meaning the toiv of Shavuos B'Tammuz, the toiv of the 3 weeks. And the Rebbe brings down the Gemara, where the Gemara says like this. The Gemara brings the posik about where it says that the day of the Tones it's called Atzoim, and then at the same time it's also called Sosim V'Simcha. The Gemara asks, Korelo Utzoim, Korelo Sosim V'Simcha. Here you call it Atzoim, and then you say it's a Sosim V'Simcha. So the Gemara says it depends. Yesh Gzeras Malchus, when we have a Gzeras Malchus, then it's Atzoim. But then when it's going to be, when it's a time of Sholem, when it's a time of Sholem, it's Sosim V'Simcha. When it's going to be Sholem in the world, then it's going to be Sosim V'Simcha. It's going to be transformed to Yom Tovim. When we have a Gzeras, a Malchus, then it's Tzoim. But then we have a time that is kind in between. There's no Sholem, not yet full Sholem, but there's no Gzeras Malchus. The Rebbe connects it with the Indian of, in Ruslan, they took off the Gzeras Malchus. Says, so the Gemara says when there's no Sholem and no Gzeras Malchus, then the Gemara says Rotzu Misanin, Rotzu Ein Misanin. What does that mean? Says the Rebbe that when the Toikef of the Golus becomes weaker, so also the Tzoim it doesn't have the same, at least in our feeling, it doesn't have the same Starkheit, it doesn't have the same, being that we're getting closer to the days of Sosim V'Simcha. So that's in general, and then the Rebbe goes on to see that in our generation even more, we see how this Chodesh, before the Rebbe spoke of Chodesh Tammuz, we see how this Chodesh became a new Indian of Geula was Nizgala in this Chodesh. In all generations, from when it happened, all the Moirois in this month, and Chodesh Tammuz, that led eventually to the Moirois of Tisha B'Av, this Tammuz was connected with Churban and Golus. Anytime Tammuz was right away associated with the Yom of Churban. But in this generation was Nizgale, a Indian of Geula by the Frierdiker Rebbe, and the Frierdiker Rebbe says it's not only for him, it's a Geula for ganz Klal Yisrael, and it's connected with the general Geula, Shem Geula, Allah, it has the name of Geula. Not only that this Geula, that the Frierdiker Rebbe led to the strengthening of the Yiddishkeit in Chetzi Kader Atachten, which is again a preparation for the Geula. So we see a new Indian of Geula came, zugekommen in Chodesh Tammuz. And then the Rebbe says like this, in the beginning of that Kufa, the Frierdiker Rebbe came out and said, La'alta le'tshuva, la'alta le'geula, we finished already all the Inyanim of Avodah, all we have to do is zuputzen die Knäpplach, to polish the buttons. So now that we're already in the end of that tkufa, the end of this tkufa, for sure, says the Rebbe, as bevadai, without any doubt, that the time of the Gula came already, it's kol akitzin, and even the union of tshuva was done b'shleimus. Every year has the nitzitz of Moshiach. So being that we are already so close to the time of Geula, so it's nirgash und mudgesh beyoyser in these days of Bein HaMetzorim Shavos B'Tammuz. It's mudgesh, the idea, it's emphasized the idea that with this we're coming to the Geula Amitis V'Ashleima. Then the Rebbe says there's another chidush in our generation. In addition to that, is also in this year. The Rebbe spoke this year in Tovshin and Aleph. The Rebbe said we saw in this year Tovshin and Aleph miracles, niflois, that show that this is the year that Melech HaMashiach niglaboy, and actually the show Shem Melech HaMashiach niglaboy. And says the Rebbe that that's a new thing the Rebbe said in that Fabringen, that we're already standing on the Saf HaGeula, the threshold of Ascholas Yemois HaMashiach, and it's a threshold, the Saf of Ascholas HaGeula. And right away it's going to be the Hemshech to that as well. So now the Rebbe comes to the union of, and not only that, so this Shivos HaBetamus, said the Rebbe, should be already the ganze Geula, and then versteht sich, it's going to be Nefach Lesosim V'Lesimcha. So now the Rebbe came to the union of Limud in Yonei Beis HaBchira, in Yonei Geula Mashiach, and in Yonei Geula in the Halakhos of Beis HaBchira. Says the Rebbe like this, that from all of this we understand how it has to be the shturim, the special shturim b'miyuched in this year when it comes to learning anything that is connected with learning in Yonei Geula Mashiach and Binya Beis HaMikdash. And the Rebbe brings down what the whole conversation of Yecheskel with the Eibishter tells them, go and tell the Yidden about the Binya of Beis HaMikdash, and they'll be ashamed from the sins. And he says, we're now in Golos, how can I tell them all about building the Beis HaMikdash? Let us first go out of Golos, and then I'll tell them. So the Eibishter says, because of that, being that my kinderlach are in Golos, Zulik them should be bottled, the building the Beis HaMikdash, let them learn about it, and when they learn about it, they'll count it as if they're actually building it. So, based on this, and behemshach to this thing that we have to learn in Yonei Geula Mashiach, and after everything that the Rebbe explained how special the time is now, that this in a year that it's on a Shabbos, and especially in our doyer that we see that Inyan of Tammuz came already in Yonam of Geula came in this month. And especially in this year, Toshan and Aleph, that we see already in Yonim in the world happening in the flows that show it's already the Shana, Shem Melech HaMashiach Niglaboy. Says the Rebbe, therefore, the way of how we learn in Yon the Halakhos of Beis HaBchira has to be in a completely different way. And the Rebbe says like this, the Rebbe says, the limud is not mitzad is gabus, not because we're strengthening the feeling of Avelus, and the ishtadlus to fix up the chisoron of the Beis HaMikdash. Rather, it's not that type of feeling, but actually, even without the churban, let's say there wouldn't be a churban. The idea, because that's the Rebbe goes on to say that in Bolok it's mudgish that you come to a geula, Keil, Mitziam, and Mitzrayim, and right away from Mitzrayim they were able to get a geula without a golus in between. They were able to get to a higher level straight. Says the Rebbe that even without the union of golus, without the churban, the learning has to be because of the koisef and ishtoikekus yearning, the fact that we want to have the mile of the Beis HaMikdash, a shlishi that's going to be added, not just bringing back something that we lost, but rather a geule, a isof, something that we never had before. And the way of learning should be not in a oifen that it's ilches ele mashiach, something is going to happen ich weiß when, but actually something that will happen. The Beis HaMikdash is already bono im meshuchlol. The Gemara says, Rashi brings down that it's already bono im meshuchlol. It's ready, all built. It just has to come down and be misgale. Yigole v'yovim min hashamayim. Take it from Yad Mamish.
Im Yisrael following Filas there will be a Siyum Mesechte as the hero of the Rebbe, and everybody is asked to stay to be part of the hero of the Rebbe.